All right, now we're live. Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Simonds. Welcome to Virtual BookNet Fest. I am so excited to be here. I guess I should introduce myself. Like author-wise, I'm the author of Collateral Damage, which is on the shelf behind me. It's a young adult novel about a powerless background extra who lives in a city protected by superheroes. And I'm here today to lead a workshop that I usually call Inspire Your Writing, but today we're calling it Drafting with Playlists, because that's pretty much what it is. If you've ever interacted with me on Twitter or seen my Twitter account, you know that pretty much my catchphrase is X counts as writing, and I fill in that blank with pretty much any creative thing that you can think of in terms of drafting. So I'm always saying that building a Spotify playlist counts as writing, being on Pinterest counts as writing, making pictures of your characters counts as writing, and it sounds like a joke, but I actually mean it sincerely. I have a lot of different methods for creative development for building plot and characters, all of which revolve around Spotify playlist building or Pinterest or any other way of visualizing your characters. And I call it audio-visual outlining. And that is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to bring up for myself. I don't think I need to screen share it. I'm just going to talk to you about it for starters. But basically, audiovisual outlining is a method that I use for drafting that involves audio, music, and visual pictures, drafting your work so that you end up kind of mentally storyboarding your work. And the reason that I like doing this is because, as I'm sure we all know, writing is kind of the worst. We love it. We love our characters. We love our ideas. But the actual process of sitting down to write is kind of the most irritating thing in the entire world. And part of that is because of how scary a blank piece of paper is. You have to rely on your imagination and nothing else to bring your ideas to fruition. And so the reason that I like using audiovisual outlining is because it's a really good way to establish tone for yourself, to establish ambiance, to get a good visualization of your characters or your setting, and to kind of use music or characters or even stories that already exist as a template to go off of, so that you can develop your own work. So what do I mean exactly? I just pulled up my law school PowerPoint on accident when I talk about Spotify building playlists. So, in terms of Spotify building playlists, I really like to rely on 3 separate kinds when I am working on a book. And it's kind of fun because normally when I teach this class, I am in the middle or near the end of the drafting process, and I normally have all of my playlists already built. But right now I'm actually right back at the beginning again because I just started drafting a new book about 2 weeks ago. So I'm in the first phase of Spotify playlist building. So I am working on this right alongside with you guys. So the first kind that I like is called the general overall playlist. I usually call it the master playlist. And I'm going to actually share my screen so that I can show you my Spotify account. I accidentally blocked my screen. I don't know why I did that. 1 second. So we're doing this and we're going to Spotify and before it let me pull up just Spotify, but it's not doing that now. So I'm gonna have to pull it up this way. Okay, so this is what my master playlist looks like. As you can see, it's got kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different songs. And I'm working on a haunted house book. So we've got some Stranger Things, we've got some Up, we've got some It, we've got all kinds of different things. And the reason that's my law school playlist, law school PowerPoint again. The reason that, or the methods that go into building a general overall playlist is what I like to call Inception Songs. Now, these are songs that come along naturally with the story concept, and they typically connect to character, plot, or tone in the more general sense. So when you first got the idea for your book, I doubt it came about in a vacuum. There was probably something that inspired you. There was probably a particular character archetype that you thought of, a particular setting, and that was what inspired you to build a twist on that story and create your own work. And for that reason, Inception songs can sometimes be inspired by cinematic comp titles. And I have off to the side this example here. So House of Salt and Sorrows, which is a book that I absolutely love, has total Crimson Peak vibes. So even if you were making a story, if you were writing a story that you knew was going to be kind of a gothic fantasy vibe kind of book, you could think of titles like Crimson Peak, and then when you start building your playlist, you can pull from the soundtrack of Crimson Peak. So when I was working on my haunted house book, like I said, I wanted it to have kind of a modern creepy vibes, house in the woods kind of deal. So I've got Stranger Things. I know that two of the characters have a relationship kind of like Carl and Ellie from Up, so I pulled from Up. I've got that song that's been going around TikTok, the one that's like, I can't decide whether you should live or die. Anyway, so that's one of the ones that I put in as my Inception songs. And the reason that Inception songs are so great is for tone. They're for ambiance. They help you establish what the general idea of your book is going to be, and that starts getting you in the right mindset before you even start writing. So some other tips for titles, or for songs that you can put on your comp title playlists, are books that you would use as comp titles. And that might sound weird because books don't ordinarily have soundtracks, but the thing that I really love about Spotify is that people have a tendency to build playlists for books that they love themselves. So for example, I just read Cemetery Boys, which was amazing. Everyone should read it. And if you click playlists, you can see that there's already a ton of playlists that other people have built that have songs that reminded them of Cemetery Boys. So if you were also writing a book that you could comp to Cemetery Boys, maybe it's got Dia de los Muertos vibes, maybe there's a ghost in it, any of the other kind of factors that went into Cemetery Boys, and you wanted some song inspiration, you could click on one of these playlists, and boom, you've got a whole list of songs that you can now use to inspire your own work. Now, the other kind of songs that I like to use for general playlists is instrumental scores from trailer music bands. I have a couple that are my favorites. Really Slow Motion is one of them, and Liquid Cinema is another. And the reason that I really like these is because they're kind of an audio shorthand for a tone, a setting, or a feeling. And we're gonna play a game in a second, or I normally play a game. I'm going to do it anyway, even though I can't see any of you, because even if you're just watching by yourself later, it's really good to have this as an example. So the reason that instrumental scores from trailer music bands are so helpful for the general music playlist is that they're typically divided up by, sorry. That's the wrong Liquid Cinema. There's one with a space and there's one without a space, and I always forget which is the one that I love. It's the without a space. So the reason that I love these trailer music bands is because they create albums that directly apply to different genres of music. So even if the only concept that you have for your book so far is that it's going to be a horror or that it's going to be a fantasy, you have this whole lineup of albums that are going to give you the right kind of sound for the book that you're looking for. So for example, if you're writing a modern suspense, check it out. You've got cinematic modern suspense. Or if you were writing something that was an epic drama, we've got that. We've got a cinematic kind of action thriller. We've got Apocalypse. There was a family one up here. Family adventure, epic family adventure, pretty much everything that you can think of in terms of genre is going to be available for you. And then Really Slow Motion, I really love for fantasy and sci-fi. Their albums aren't divided up by genre, but you can kind of get a sense of what the general vibe is going to be just based on the title of the album. So Charged is a very kind of like electronic, techno, futuristic sound. Elevation is very like epic fantasy. Other Worlds is like sci-fi. And so you can click on these and it'll give you a lineup of songs that, like I said, will kind of match the vibe of the genre that you're going to be working in. This is super weird because I'm still sharing my screen and now it's like a million of me. So let's go back to my PowerPoint real fast so we don't have to look at that. Also, sorry about my desktop. I'm in law school, so I have like a million tabs open for things that I'm studying that I took a break from to hang out with you guys today. So that covers audio shorthand for the general playlist. And then the final tip that I have in terms of building your general playlist is use the Spotify radio feature. Spotify, like pretty much every other media app right now, has a predictive algorithm that is very good at tracking what exactly you're listening to, what exactly you're working on. And once you start building your playlist, even with a couple of songs, the predictive algorithm is very good at interpreting the kind of book that you're working on and giving you songs that match. So you obviously can either click on the radio feature for the entire playlist and get a mix, or if you have a particular song that relates to the tone of the scene that you're working on, you can click on the radio feature for that, and it'll find music that has a similar chord progression, that has a similar musical style, that even has similar lyrics or covers similar topics. When I was working on my last book, which took place in space and was about space mermaids, I was actually really surprised at how quickly Spotify realized that I was working on a book about space mermaids, because I suddenly, when I turned on the radio, was constantly getting songs with lyrics that were metaphors for love that utilized either the ocean or stars. And I was like, good job, Spotify. So that is the general playlist. So moving on a little more into scene drafting playlists, this is where the audio-visual outlining technique really kind of reaches, like, this is where I kind of like pinpoint specific scenes, and I call it storyboarding. It's a play on storyboarding, which is obviously what animators do when they're making an animated movie. You obviously wouldn't start animating it in the final version right off the bat. You are going to have a rough draft first. So I call it storyboarding because it's kind of like creating that rough draft for yourself in your head. And to do this, I rely on instrumental scores from movies with scenes that are similar to the scene that I'm trying to write. And the reason that I do that is because instrumental scores represent complete professionally paced scenes. Scoring is typically the last thing that's done in a movie. So when the score is created, it's to match a scene that already exists, that's already been shot, that's already been written, and the music is hitting every emotional beat that scene has to offer. So I keep reopening my law school PowerPoint. I need this to stop. Okay. So instrumental scores, because they're associated with film and TV, they evoke a natural, heightened emotional reaction. So think about how it feels when you listen to the theme from Up. I mean, I know I always start crying immediately. It's just kind of an automatic visceral reaction. But even scores that relate to action sequences or flight sequences, think about if you like How to Train Your Dragon, the test flight score, which is one of my all-time favorite scores. You can listen to that, and even without watching the animation, you know exactly what part Hiccup and Toothless start flying. You know when he loses his direction sheets and they start coming apart. You know when he stops relying on the direction sheet and trusts his gut and they finally start working together. You can get all of those moments just from the breakdown of the music. And on top of that, pacing in books is extremely, extremely difficult. So using professional scoring as kind of a template to pace yourself while you're writing your scenes and figuring out where those emotional beats are going to go, how much time you're going to dedicate to different emotions, it can be really, really helpful. And so the exercise that I typically do when we're in class, I'm going to do now. It's going to be super awkward because I can't see any of you, especially if you're watching this later, but the score is only about a minute long, so it's not going to be a big deal. So I'm going to head on over back to Liquid Cinema. And what I want you to do is I'm going to play a score, and let me find it real fast. I'm going to play the score. It's only about a minute long, and all I want you to do is listen to it. I just want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes and listen to it, and I want you to imagine what is happening in this scene. That's all you have to do. And so the only hint that I'm going to give you is two characters, okay? So one of them is going to be your hero, and one of them is going to be your villain. And that's the only hint that I'm going to give you. And I'm stalling because I'm having difficulty finding this score, even though I saved it earlier, and I use it every single time. And now I can't find it, and that's embarrassing because I just hyped it up so much. I found it. We're good to go. It's 43 seconds long. Like I said, hero, villain, and just close your eyes and picture what is going on in this scene. Scroll out of the frame. I'm back. Okay. Hopefully you could hear that. I didn't test how it would work when I played stuff live on my computer before this. So hopefully you all could hear that. This is the not as fun part because typically I'm face to face with people and I ask them to share what they wrote or what they thought about. So if anybody wants to, or if anybody feels comfortable dropping in the comments any kind of visualization that they might have had while listening to that music, whether they imagined any actions that the characters were doing, or whether they got an idea of what the setting looked like, any kind of information, then feel free to do that. But otherwise, I can just tell you that typically when I do this exercise, there's kind of a general universal response that the hero was hiding from the villain. And sometimes people will tell me what the hero was hiding behind. Sometimes they'll tell me what the lighting was like. Sometimes they'll tell me what the hero was wearing. Sometimes people get ideas of internal dialogue that was going on in the head of whoever their point of view character was. And that's kind of the magic of instrumental scores, at least I believe, is that if I had just said to you, write a paragraph about a hero and a villain and one is hiding from the other, that's not very much to go on. Sky's kind of the limit, and when sky's the limit, it can be intimidating. You don't really know which direction to go in. But if you know that your general tone is suspense, and the name of that score from Liquid Cinema is actually apprehension. If you know that apprehension and suspense is your tone, and you find a musical score that conveys that tone, just by closing your eyes and listening to it, you'll actually find that a lot of the storyboarding work for the scene is done mentally. And then you have a much stronger jumping off point for when you actually start working on your book. So obviously, like I said, you can use groups like Liquid Cinema or Really Slow Motion or any other kind of generic genre-based sounds very easily in building your scenes depending on the tone. But another option that you always have is to find a scene from a movie that you like that more closely on a like an emotion to emotion or on an action to action basis matches the kind of thing that you're going for. I know that my go-to for any kind of scene that involves a heart-to-heart conversation between two characters who are slowly starting to trust each other, I always go to Campfire, which is a score from Tangled. It's the score when Eugene and Rapunzel are sitting next to each other at the campfire, and Eugene is telling Rapunzel about his past as a kid, and she just finished telling him that she has magic hair that glows when she sings. So that is kind of my perfect template for a heart-to-heart conversation, especially because in a lot of higher action or fantasy books, those heart-to-heart conversations will get interrupted by something, and there's a perfect sting at the end of that score that conveys that interruption, which in the movie is when Mother Gothel shows up, but in your book could be whatever you want. But the point is that it can be very, very helpful to find a score that matches the kind of scene you're going for, because it does all of the emotional pacing work for you, and all you have to do is apply it to the book that you're writing. So that kind of covers the second kind of score, the second kind of playlist rather, which is a scene drafting playlist. And the other thing that I really like about scene drafting playlists, and I'm going to share my screen for this again so I can show you mine. When you're working on a book, you're not often going to go back and like read every single page that you wrote. But it can be very helpful to, especially if you're like me and you're not really like that much of an outliner and you're more of either a pantser or a plantser. I used to be a pantser. I'm better now. I'm much more of a plantser, I guess bordering on plotter because of the audiovisual outlining thing. But if you need a way to quickly establish, can you see my screen again? Are we good? There we go. Oh my God, this is just, I hate the little like endless tunnel thing. Anyway, if you need a way to quickly remind yourself, not only what scenes you've already written, but like where the emotional tone of your book is, these drafting playlists can be super, super helpful. So what I actually do is I have a song that represents every single scene in my book, which sounds a little like overkill, I know, but I promise it's enormously effective. So this is the book that I just wrote, that I'm currently querying. Someone please take it from me, adopt my children. It's called An Infinite Pull. It's a space fantasy, that I keep saying is space mermaids. They're not really space mermaids. They just have like very mermaid. They're like jellyfish mermaids. They're like aliens. I'm doing a horrible job of explaining this. Anyway, very like Little Mermaid meets Treasure Planet vibes was the goal. But I have a different score or song. Some of them are songs that walk me through every single scene in this book. And as you can see, there's a lot, but when I was working on it, whether I was drafting or revising, I could always pinpoint exactly what the tone of the scene that I was working on was supposed to be just by clicking on the song that I knew was aligned to that scene. So as you can see, I have Campfire right here because I have a heart-to-heart moment. I have a song, I have a musical score, from Alien, for when something scary happens. I have, let's see, I have a score from Star Wars for when one of the characters is confronted by an intimidating person of authority. And so, like I said, even though the book is already done, like I've already finished the book, I now have the entirety of it all laid out for me. So if I ever need to go back and revise anything, even without, reading the entire book all over again, reading every single page, I can remember the order of events and I can remember the emotional progression throughout the story. So that's why I really like to make these drafting playlists. And I'm slowly working on one for the potential sequel. So as you can see, it's not very long yet, because I don't have as many scenes planned out, but it will obviously get longer. And as I change things, I can move songs around. it's just very, very helpful. It's nice to have it all like out in front of you. All right, I'm stopping the screen again so we don't have to look through the like endless tunnel of my face. All right, so those are the first two kinds of playlists. The third is probably my favorites. The third is character playlists. Once again, this might sound like overkill, but I create a different playlist for every character in the book whenever I'm working on a project. And the reason that I do that is because having a character playlist, especially if you find good themes that represent your character's personality, is a wonderful way to create an audio shorthand for that character. Especially if you're writing a book that contains more than one point of view. I know that with my last book, I only had 2 points of view, and sometimes I found it enormously challenging jumping back and forth between these different characters' heads. Both of them were in first person present, which is a very active, very personal style of writing. And I really needed to make sure that I was encompassing and embodying this character as much as possible. And so the way that I do that is by creating these character identity playlists. Because by listening to music, I am able to allow myself to get inside that character's head much faster and much more effectively than if I just sat down in front of the computer and was like, okay, I'm in Aaron's head today, let's go. So as kind of it's going to sound like a detour, but I have a point, I promise. I'm a huge musical theater person. And if you are at all familiar with any kind of musical theater, you might be familiar with something called the I Want or the I Am song. Now, this is a song that is in most Broadway musicals and even most Disney movies, especially the Renaissance era Disney movies. And it's, like I said, it's that audio shorthand for a character's personality, motivation, goals, fears, and or obstacles. I believe it was either Alan Menken or Howard Ashman, but I think it might have been Howard Ashman, who explained it once by saying that it's the song at the beginning of the show where your character sits down on something and sings to the audience about what they want. And it's very, very helpful for establishing character relatability in musicals where you have limited time, because it allows the character to convey to the audience exactly who they are and what they want right off the bat. So even if you're not familiar with Broadway musicals enough to recognize that My Shot from Hamilton is an I Want song or an I Am song, The Wizard and I from Wicked is an I Want song, you are probably familiar with Disney movies at the very least. So Part of Your World is an enormously famous I Want, I Am song. Even if you hadn't seen the rest of the movie up until that point, you could listen to Part of Your World and understand exactly who Ariel's character is. In Aladdin, we've got One Jump Ahead, the reprise, probably not the original one. In Hercules, we've got Go the Distance. In Mulan, we've got Reflection. In Tangled, we've got When Will My Life Begin? In Frozen, we've got For the First Time in Forever. They're songs that come at the beginning of the show, and like I said, they tell the audience who the character is and what they want. Now, I'm not telling you this because I want you to take that principle and apply it to your writing. I'm not saying sit down and write an entire chapter that is one of the characters breaking the fourth wall and telling the reader, this is who I am and this is what I want, because you definitely want your exposition to be conveyed a little more subtly than that. But the reason that I'm telling you this is because finding that I Want or I Am song, even if it's not from a Broadway musical, can be enormously helpful for understanding who your character is for you as the writer. So that's where the playlists come in. So I'm going to hop back over to my playlists again so that I can show you some examples. And so the way that I typically come across my I Want or my I Am songs is kind of similar to the strategy that I talked about when I was talking about building general playlists, about how you look for comp titles. So rather than looking for comp titles of movies or books, in this case, I look for comp characters. So I do a thing that I call putting characters in a blender when I'm building characters. And even if this isn't something that you do, like I said, for the most part, our ideas don't come out of a vacuum. There's probably a character that you love or an actor that you love, whether it's from a book or a movie or a TV show or a video game that created the loose idea for the characters that you're working on in your book. Maybe you really, really like a specific character from Star Wars, you like their personality, and you're just going to adopt various traits and put them in a different situation and mix them with other traits and create your own thing. It doesn't have to be Star Wars, obviously. It could be Disney. It could be any show that you like, really anything that you like. So what I do in terms of finding songs is I go back to Spotify. Forgot to share my screen again. We're going to do that again. Here we go. It's always a process when I share my screen. It's always like, oh, it's finally letting me just click Spotify. That's exciting. Okay, so there we go. Woohoo! So first I'm going to show you my playlists for, again, Space Mermaids, because that's forefront of my mind because it's finished. One of the characters in Space Mermaids is this kid named Aaron, who is my son, and I love him. He is a very anxious inventor boy who has parental issues. He just wants to make his mother proud, and he cares deeply what other people think about him. He's very shy. He's very awkward. He feels like he doesn't fit in with the rest of his crew. He wants desperately to belong. He's very earnest. And if you're looking at these qualities and saying, hey, Taylor, that sounds familiar, you'd be right, because it's the same kind of archetype that is applied to characters like Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, Callum from The Dragon Prince, Varian from Tangled the series, Peter Parker, just that kind of like nerdy, awkward inventor boy who wants approval from a position of authority. That's the kind of character that I love. And so I wrote one. This is my playlist, as you can see. And so we've actually got songs that were sung by Varian from Tangled the series, because that was kind of a mental comp that I used. And then we've got all kinds of other stuff. We've got Good Kid from The Lightning Thief. We've got I'm Still Here from Treasure Planet. But if I hadn't built this playlist yet and I wasn't sure how I wanted to go about doing it, I could say, hey, my character shares some qualities with Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon. So I'm going to search for Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, and look at that. There's a Hiccup playlist. And now there's a whole list of songs that are either from How to Train Your Dragon itself, or they're songs that kind of relate to that personality type. So I've already got some songs that I can work with, and obviously not all of them are going to apply and not all of them you're going to like, but it's just a really nice jumping off point. So that's how I like to go about starting to build my character playlists until I get more ideas. But the other thing that I really like to use is I really like to use Enneagram types as a way to start building the playlist as well. And for this, I'm talking about like right at the beginning of the story, right when you're working on conceptualizing stuff and you're trying to build your playlists and you're not really sure where to begin. I would really recommend taking an Enneagram test for your characters. Now, if you've never taken an Enneagram test before, an Enneagram test is a personality test, kind of like the Myers-Briggs one, but I like it because it goes kind of one step further in defining not only what your character, or not only what the person taking the test, like what their likes and dislikes are, or how they are about socializing, but it also talks about how they are as a child, how they are as a parent, what kind of stress they react to, how they act when they are in love, how they act when they're afraid. It kind of covers pretty much every emotional reaction or social reaction that one could possibly have. So I'm going to click over to the Enneagram website really fast, just so that I can show you what the Enneagram charts look like, and what the actual test looks like. That didn't do it. 1 second. Okay. So once you make it to the Enneagram test, and I'm going to share my screen again so that you can see what it looks like. And we're sharing, and we're doing entire screen. And you're going to see the tunnel of my face again. There we go. Okay. So this is what the Enneagram test looks like. So as you can see, there's really simple questions. I've been A, romantic and imaginative, or B, pragmatic and down to earth, things like that. There's 36 of them and then 2 for statistics. And so what I like to do is take this test as my character, not as myself. And it helps me think out of the box, because typically when you do character work, if you're doing a chart, it'll ask you questions like, oh, what's their favorite food? What's their favorite color? What do they want to be when they grow up? What's their relationship like with their parents? It'll be more character specific questions. And these are kind of more idealistic ones about personality. And it uses the answers to assign you 1 out of 9 different Enneagram types. And so once you click on, or once you get assigned your type, it's going to tell you which category you most fall into. And then there's also these things called wings, but I won't get into that because that tells you, you're primarily this type, but you might be secondarily a different type. But basically what it does is it'll tell you which type you are, and then it gives you all of these different charts that will help walk you through pretty much, like I said, every conceivable aspect of a person's personality. So for example, one of my characters is 6. Yes. So Aaron was a 6, going back to him. And so we've got a list of how to get along with him, what they like about being a 6, what's hard about it, what they're like as children, what they're like as parents. You can click over to emotions in the Enneagram, and it'll give you like a really easy breakdown of the kind of stuff that typically goes into character arc development. So you can see what they're defined by, what they reject, what kind of strength they need, what their defense mechanism is, what their speaking style is, like how they relate to others, what they're preoccupied with. And so you can look at all of this, and it'll give you an idea of where your character is at the beginning and what would be a good direction to take them in that would establish the strongest character growth. So I absolutely love that. I love that this is available. And then there's one more. I don't think it's this one. I think it might be E-type structures. In terms of character development that I really love, that'll give you, here's another great one. It tells you what your approach to problem solving is, what your self-justification is. But there's one that'll tell you like what your character arc is. Oh, here it is. It was the first one that I clicked on. I messed up. So this one will tell you if you have, and it says makes the leap to trust in a higher power. But what that basically means in terms of books is if you have a healthy character arc, you will become peaceful, you'll discover common sense wisdom, and you'll become expressive and a self-starter. So it gives you a nice comparison of what you would look like at the beginning of the book versus what you could look like at the end of the book if you had a healthy character development. And then conversely, it will also tell you if you have an unhealthy character development. In this case, 6s are prone to anxiety. So in this case, when a 6 gives in to anxieties, it would disconnect from loyalty to others, become heartless, become confused and indecisive, become self-defeating and dependent. And so this level right here could be really, really helpful if you were either creating a character that devolved into villainy or trying to humanize your current villain, because you can look at what they are currently and see where they might have come from. So I just love that. Not to digress, I had a point that related to Spotify playlist building, I swear. I just really love talking about Enneagram types, but the point as it relates to Spotify playlist building is that once you figure out your character's Enneagram type, just like everything else that I've been talking about, there's a playlist for that. So I'm not the only person who loves Enneagrams, and I'm certainly not the first person to discover it. And if you head on over to Spotify, I'm going to share my screen again so I can show you. I don't know why I keep bothering to turn it off. I mean, I do it so that you don't have to look at the tunnel of my face. But if you head on over to Spotify, you can say, okay, in this case, we've got an Enneagram. I spelled Enneagram wrong. Let's say your character's an Enneagram 6. You can scroll down a playlist, and there's going to be a ton of playlists. And this is true no matter what Enneagram type you get, that consist of songs that relate to the personalities of somebody who would fall under that Enneagram type. And that can be enormously helpful for getting into the mind and personality of the character that you're working on as well. And in addition to that, just if you need one more bonus Enneagram playlist, this one is actually, and I can't spell Enneagram today. So if you have ever heard of Sleeping at Last, they're one of my favorite groups. They have the most beautiful mellow sound and the most poignant lyrical music I've ever heard. And they actually have an album called Enneagram that has a song for every single Enneagram type that exists. And I'm a 3, and when I listened to my song, I cried because I felt so seen. It really gets into the core of what makes that personality weak and what makes them strong, and it can be so helpful once again as a jumping off point for using these kinds of songs to get into the minds of your characters, because that's really what that's I believe one of the most fun things about writing, and also one of the most challenging, is putting yourself in the mind and personality of somebody that's not you and trying to instill them with life. And there's a reason that music is so emotional and so permeating in culture, and it's because it allows people to feel things that they normally can't put words to, and that's why I love it so much. And so I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that while you're writing, whether it's through developing a character playlist for the characters, or it's using an instrumental score to set the pacing of a scene. No matter what way you use music, I guarantee you it's not going to hurt. It's going to be very, very helpful. So I'm going to click back to my PowerPoint, but I believe that is pretty much the end. Yep, that is pretty much the end of my my character building or my playlist building knowledge, because like I said, it comes down to those 3. You've got the general playlists, you've got the drafting playlist that's scene by scene, and then you've got the character building playlists. And I did finish about 15 minutes early, so I'm very sorry, BookNet Fest. I think I talk fast when I don't have anybody to interrupt me. And normally, like I said, I'm in front of a group of people and someone will interrupt me. So if you would like to ask any questions, now is probably the time. So I'm gonna click on over to the chat and see if anybody has any specific questions about playlists. If you don't know where to start, if you're working on a specific project in a certain genre and you don't know what your comp titles would be, if you need help finding any soundtracks, let me know. I have an extensive knowledge of film scores because it's my favorite kind of music to listen to, and I can probably point you in the right direction of either a score that would fit your genre, or even probably a specific song that would fit the scene that you're working on. Yeah, so otherwise, I don't know how to sign off of this because this is my first time hosting and I don't want to break it. So oh, you're going to end it? Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much to anyone who was watching. This was super fun. Hopefully you gained some useful tips for working on your own books. Happy writing. You can always find me on Twitter if you have any questions or just want to talk. I'm at Tay_Simonds, Simonds. And also please consider buying my book, Collateral Damage, available wherever books are sold. It's pretty funny, I've heard. I'm not good at hyping myself up. People say that it's good. I don't really know. I'm doing great at this. I'm going to end on a confident note. I'm a YA author. Please buy my book. It's pretty great. Thank you so much for having me, BookNet Fest. Bye!